The laughter hit before I'd even settled into my chair. My brother Jason raised his glass with that familiar smirk. Everyone, please join me in thanking my sister for gracing us with her presence between shifts of playing nurse. The table erupted. My mother's lips curved into a practiced smile. My sister-in-law's laugh rang the loudest. No one corrected him. No one mentioned the 12 years of medical school and residency. No one mentioned the thousands of patients who had passed through my care. To them, I was simply quiet Emma, the daughter who never earned enough, never bragged enough, never registered on their radar. 3 hours later, their son stopped breathing. Suddenly, every eye in the room found me. My name is Dr. Emma Parker, and for most of my life, my family treated my career like an elaborate hobby, not because they were cruel, because they never cared enough to look closer. Jason had always been the golden child. When he bought a new truck, it was a celebration. When he earned a promotion, it dominated conversation for months. When he hosted his annual lake house gathering, relatives drove across 3 states to attend. Meanwhile, I could work 80-hour weeks in one of the busiest emergency departments in the state, and somehow it never impressed anyone. To my family, I was just Emma, the quiet one, the single one, the daughter who worked at a hospital, or, as Jason liked to phrase it, playing nurse. The irony was that I never corrected him. I'd learned years ago that some people hear only what they want to hear. The trouble began, as it always did, at Jason's annual summer party. Every July, he transformed his lake house into a gathering spot for family, friends, co-workers, and what seemed like half the neighborhood. This year followed the same script. By noon, the backyard swelled with people. Children darted between adults. Music pulsed from outdoor speakers. Laughter rose above the sizzle of grills. Boats traced lazy paths across the glittering water behind the property. I arrived carrying a fruit tray and a small gift for my nephew, Ethan, at 9 years old. He was sharp, spirited, and, without question, my favorite person at the party. The moment I stepped into the backyard, my mother spotted me. "There she is," she announced, gesturing with the enthusiasm of someone introducing a minor celebrity. Several guests turned. I offered a polite smile. "This is my daughter, Emma," she continued. "She helps out at a hospital." A few people nodded. One woman asked, "Are you a nurse?" Before I could respond, Jason materialized beside me, draping an arm across my shoulders. "Something like that." He laughed. "Emma's been playing nurse for years." The group chuckled. I watched the woman's interest evaporate as she pivoted toward Jason. Of course she did. Jason owned a successful construction company. Jason had the sprawling lake house. Jason drove the expensive truck. Jason was the interesting one. I excused myself quietly and retreated to the patio. A few minutes later, I found myself sitting beside Ethan, who was demolishing a hot dog while showing me photos of fish he hoped to catch. "You staying all day?" he asked. "Probably." "Good." He grinned. "You're the only grown-up who actually listens." I laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." The afternoon rolled on. Conversations ricocheted between money, business, and achievement. Jason detailed his latest project. My sister-in-law described upcoming vacation plans. Several relatives compared investment portfolios. No one asked about my work. No one asked about my patients. No one asked about anything I'd accomplished. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Then I noticed Ethan and several other children heading toward the dock. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Kids had been swimming all afternoon. But something snagged my attention, a subtle wrongness. The adults had stopped watching. Most were clustered near the food tables or glued to a baseball game on the outdoor television. I glanced back at the lake. The children had drifted farther from shore than I liked. I stood. Jason noticed. "Relax, doctor," he joked. More laughter rippled through the nearby group. "They're fine." I forced a smile and sat back down, but unease coiled in my stomach like a snake. A few minutes later, I looked toward the water again. One child climbed onto the dock. Another followed. Then another. But Ethan didn't. I scanned the water once, twice, 3 times. No Ethan. My heart dropped like a stone. I shot to my feet so fast my chair nearly toppled. "Where's Ethan?" I shouted. No one answered. I was already running. Then a terrified scream split the afternoon. A woman pointed toward the lake. and every face turned toward the water. The moment I heard that scream, instinct took over. I sprinted toward the dock. Behind me, voices collided in chaos. Someone yelled Ethan's name. Someone else was already calling 911. But panic doesn't save lives. Action does. At the edge of the dock, I spotted him, about 20 feet from shore, partially submerged, motionless. I dove without hesitation. The lake shocked cold against my skin. I ignored it. My focus narrowed to a single point, Ethan. Within seconds, I reached him. I hooked one arm across his chest and began pulling him toward shore. The swim back stretched impossibly long. Every second mattered. Every second felt like an eternity. When I finally reached shallow water, 2 guests rushed forward to help me carry him onto the grass. The crowd surged around us. People were crying. My sister-in-law was hysterical. Jason stood frozen, his face drained of color. I checked Ethan quickly. Then I looked up. I need space. No one moved. Move back. This time they listened. The crowd retreated. I focused entirely on Ethan. My training had prepared me for moments like this, not because they were easy, but because staying calm often means the difference between helping and making things worse. I checked his breathing, checked his responsiveness. Then I began emergency care while directing others around me. I pointed at a guest. Stay on the phone with emergency services. He nodded. I said to another. Meet the ambulance at the entrance. People finally had direction. The chaos began to organize. Jason dropped to his knees beside me, his face ashen. Emma, his voice cracked. Please help him. I didn't answer, not out of anger, because all my attention belonged to Ethan. Long moments passed, the longest moments of my life. Then, a cough. Small at first, then another. The entire crowd gasped. Ethan began responding. Relief crashed across dozens of faces at once. His mother burst into fresh tears. Jason covered his face with both hands. Minutes later, emergency responders arrived. I briefed them quickly. They placed Ethan on a stretcher and prepared him for transport. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Jason grabbed my shoulder. Thank you. I simply nodded. There would be time for conversations later. Right now, Ethan mattered. The entire family followed the ambulance to the hospital. The waiting room felt like a different world from the party. Gone were the jokes. Gone was the laughter. Gone were the comments about playing nurse. Everyone sat in silence. Everyone looked worried. Everyone finally understood how serious the situation had been. I stayed nearby but kept to myself. The emergency department staff moved efficiently around us. About 40 minutes later, a physician exited the treatment area with news. Ethan was stable. The collective relief was overwhelming. People hugged. Several family members started crying again. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to relax. Then something unexpected happened. A familiar voice echoed through the hallway. Dr. Parker? I looked up. Walking toward us was Dr. Michael Reynolds, the hospital's emergency department chief, one of the most respected physicians in the region. He smiled when he saw me. Then his expression shifted to confusion. Doctor, he said, why are you sitting in the waiting room? The conversation around us stopped instantly. Every single member of my family turned toward me, including my mother, including Jason. Dr. Reynolds looked around the room, then laughed lightly. You should be back with us. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Half the physicians in this department trained under you. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the distant beeping of monitors from down the hallway. Judging by the shocked expressions surrounding me, the surprises were only beginning. For several seconds, no one spoke. My mother stared at me as if she were looking at a stranger. Jason blinked twice. You're a doctor? He finally asked. The question would have been funny under different circumstances. Instead, it just made me tired. Before I could answer, Dr. Reynolds looked genuinely confused. Of course she's a doctor. He glanced around the waiting room. Then his expression changed slowly, as if he was beginning to understand. You didn't know? No one answered. Dr. Reynolds folded his arms. Emma has been an emergency physician for over a decade. The room remained silent. He continued. She's also one of the people responsible for developing several emergency response training programs used throughout our hospital network. Jason's jaw literally dropped. My mother looked embarrassed. But drive. Reynolds wasn't finished. Actually, he said, most of the younger physicians in our department have learned something from her at one point or another. I wished he would stop. Not because he was wrong, but because attention had never been something I enjoyed. For years, I'd been perfectly happy letting my work speak for itself. Apparently, my family had never bothered listening. A nurse passing through the hallway noticed me. Her face brightened. Dr. Parker. She walked over smiling. I wanted to thank you again for helping fund the pediatric family room. My mother looked up sharply. What did she mean by fund it? The nurse smiled. Oh, Dr. Parker donated anonymously. I closed my eyes for a moment. There went that secret. The nurse continued. Hundreds of families use that room every year. Before I could change the subject, another staff member stopped beside us. Dr. Parker, congratulations on the State Recognition Award last month. Jason looked completely stunned now. Award? The staff member nodded. For her work improving emergency preparedness programs. Then he hurried away. The waiting room fell silent again. One revelation after another. One piece of a life my family had never bothered to understand. Finally, my mother spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell us? I looked at her. The answer came easily. Because nobody ever asked. That hurt more than I intended. I could see it on her face. Jason stared at the floor. For years, they had filled every conversation with assumptions. They thought they knew who I was. They never actually checked. A few minutes later, Ethan's physician entered the waiting room. Good news. Excellent news. Ethan is doing well and expected to make a full recovery. The relief was immediate. My sister-in-law cried again, this time from happiness. Jason wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Then, Ethan was wheeled briefly through the hallway before being transferred upstairs for observation. The moment he saw me, he smiled. Aunt Emma. Hey, buddy. His small voice was weak, but cheerful. Mom said you saved me. I squeezed his hand gently. You did the hard part. He grinned. Then he said something I'll never forget. I want to be like you when I grow up. My throat tightened. That's a pretty big goal. He smiled wider. Good. After he disappeared down the hallway, Jason walked toward me. For once, there was no joke, no sarcasm, no audience, just my brother. I'm sorry, Emma. I looked at him quietly. He shook his head. For everything. Then my mother stepped forward. Tears filled her eyes. We should have been proud of you a long time ago. Maybe they should have. Maybe they shouldn't have needed a hospital waiting room to see me clearly. But people grow at different speeds. Some lessons simply take longer. As we sat together that evening, I realized something important. The title that changed my family's opinion wasn't doctor. It was the moment they finally saw who I had been all along.